Laros and Kotze. I believe you may be from the Department of Environmental Affairs. In that order, if you could just quickly introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Ernst Bart. I'm online.
Good afternoon, honourable members. Marlene Leross from the Department of Environment Affairs and Development Planning, online.
Good afternoon, Anwar Ghafoor from the department, online.
Thank you, Mr. Ghafoor. Are there any other people that would like us just to, for a minute, introduce themselves? None? So thank you very much to each and everybody. We have received apologies for this afternoon's meeting from Mr. Anton Bradel, our Minister of Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, as well as of Dr. Rezina Omar, the Chief Executive Officer of Cape Nature, who unfortunately, if I'm correct, has got a board meeting that's been set up quite a long time ago. And I think we fully understand her position, not being able then to be with us. And then lastly, an apology was also received from Mr. Piet van Zyl, the head of the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. And I trust that some of the officials will report back to him on this meeting in this regard. Our procedural officer, Ms. Niekerk, did you receive any other apologies for this afternoon's meeting?
No, Chairperson. Those were all the apologies received.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then, can I just say, I think we've welcomed each and everybody. Mr. Ayub Mohammed, did I miss your name?
I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad to hear your voices as well. Thank you. Members, just a little bit of protocol in terms of our online meetings. We ask that you mute yourselves unless you wish to speak or want to draw my attention. And then also, if you could put your video off while you're not speaking, but please put it on when you speak. And it would also assist us if you could identify yourself by stating your name before proceeding to speak. Also, if you would like an opportunity to ask questions or speak later on in the meeting, please just quickly switch your microphone on and I will make a list of speakers and then give you an opportunity to take part in the meeting. Then please also note that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and we wish to welcome everybody that's taking an interest in the affairs of Cape Nature and this committee. And then also, should you at any stage get dropped off from this meeting, please feel free to contact our ICT staff who are available to give you assistance in order to join us again. Good. And then just in brief, the agenda, we will first have the presentation by Dr. Bart. Then there will be a question and answer session. Then I'll be giving the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning an opportunity to also give input as to some of the aspects raised. And then we will proceed to resolutions. And then there will be some administrative business such as the adoption of previous minutes, the quarterly report, etc. Good. And then lastly, I would just like to share with our members also the draft program going forward, as I believe it was adopted this morning by the Programming Authority. Thank you, members. If that is fine with you, I would like to give Dr. Bart an opportunity to start with his presentation. Dr. Bart, I don't know how familiar you are, but I trust that you would be able to share your presentation by sharing your screen on your computer with us, which will then also allow you to scroll or to move from one slide to the next. Would you see if that can work for you?
Chair, yes, thank you very much. I will be able to share the presentation from my screen. Can I just check, did I read you correctly? Did I need to switch on my video?
I don't think it makes much of a difference if you could just share your presentation.
Sure. Okay, then I'll go ahead and start the presentation if that's okay with you, Chair.
Please proceed. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Can I just check, Chair, that all the members or the meeting attendants are that the presentation is on screen?
It's on our screen. Thank you very much. We can follow.
Right. Thank you so much, Chair, and good afternoon again to everybody who has joined the meeting. I would like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the committee and the guests today's presentation. It is a privilege for us to share this information in these times. And again, I'm presenting on behalf of Dr. Omar, our CEO, who unfortunately could not join us at the meeting due to commitments with board committee meetings and so on. So, Chair, without further ado, I'm going to then go into the presentation. But with your support, Chair, I am going to, as you suggested, the additional questions that you have sent through last night, but I will also add them into the presentation at the relevant slides, if you would allow me, please.
Thank you very much for handling that in that way. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Members, Chairperson, honourable members, guests, I would like to start by saying is that the Western Cape Province is really a very special place. I think from a landscape point of view, we have fantastic landscapes and seascapes. This is a very popular destination for many people, both domestically and internationally. And I think what also makes the Western Cape very special is that it is a very unique and special area in the world, if not elsewhere, for biodiversity and ecosystems. We have the fantastic Cape Floral Kingdom, succulent Karoo, all of which are unique in the world, and also which makes it a very special place. We are, in the Western Cape, we're not only endowed with fantastic landscapes, seascapes and biodiversity and fantastic ecosystems, but also, Chair, we have a place here in the Western Cape where people and the history in our landscapes are written on the walls of our fantastic mountains in the Cape Fold Mountains. The rich cultural history of the people of this part of the world, and I think altogether this makes the Western Cape just absolutely a unique place. I would like to carry on by briefly showing you a map of the Western Cape Province as it relates to the management function or the mandate for Western Cape Nature Conservation Board, or as we are known as Cape Nature. As you can see, we are working across the Western Cape Province, and we are a public entity of the Western Cape Government who is responsible and has the mandate for biodiversity conservation in the Western Cape Province. I would like to add a note by saying is that unlike some of the other provinces where, for example, a provincial parks board like Mpumalanga Parks or Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Board, we are a public entity that works both on and off nature reserves in the Western Cape Province. You will note in light green, I hope my cursor is visible, but you will see, for example, our protected area network basically following the Cape Fold Mountains all the way from the northwest to in the Matsikama area, the Knashvlakte Nature Reserve, all the way southwards to the Kogelberg in the south, and all the way to the Kamanasi Mountain Nature Reserve in the eastern part of the Western Cape. This is basically our provincial protected area network. But I think the next map I have added just to emphasize the point that besides the in dark green, as you will see, that would be the protected area network. Not only do we have fantastic and unique biodiversity inside our nature reserves, but as you can see on this biodiversity spatial plan for the Western Cape Province, that we have also biodiversity of very, very high quality and very high conservation value outside of our protected areas. And therefore, we believe that our mandate stretches beyond our boundaries and into the landscape. This is also why we have, in the last few years, started looking beyond our boundaries, and actually now, over the last year, have adopted a more landscape conservation model, where we are saying that we would like to draw in partners and partnerships, stakeholders within our landscapes, in order to assist us in looking after this fantastic piece of land that we and piece of South Africa that we have. In fact, this unique piece of the world that we're looking after. You will note, just a final note on this map, Chair and honourable members, yes, that not only do we have in the Western Cape provincial nature reserves, like the Cederberg and the Kogelberg, the Swartberg and all of those areas, but also a number of national parks, for example, in the eastern part, the Garden Route, Tsitsikamma, as well as West Coast National Park, the Tankwa, Karoo National Park, and then of course along our coastal boundary, a number of marine protected areas, notably those that are managed by Cape Nature in the Western Cape, and that would be the Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area, the Whip Marine Protected Area, Stilbaai Marine Protected Area, the Gaukama near Naitswa, and then also the Keerbooms Robberg Marine Protected Area in the eastern part. Here I will proceed then to look at the questions and the briefing raised by the Standing Committee in terms of sharing some information in terms of what impact the current COVID-19 lockdown period has had on Cape Nature's business, not only our operational business, but also our financial situation as well as the ecotourism situation. I would like to, before I carry on with this slide on the screen right now, just Chair, in terms of the additional questions posed by the committee, would like to state that in terms of to what extent Cape Nature staff members have been equipped and able to work productively during the lockdown period, I would like to respond by saying is that according to the nationally promulgated regulations, the majority of Cape Nature staff members were able and authorized to work remotely from home. And that is all the way from the executive and senior management level to our reserve managers. Those without information technology equipment like computers and Wi-Fi and MiFi devices and connectivity were provided where possible with means to work productively from home. Those staff members who could not do their normal work from or at home, as an example, I would use, for example, our field rangers. Their work is in our nature reserve doing patrols and so on. Unfortunately, those kinds of work cannot be done at home. Those people have been have been granted special leave during the lockdown period, and also were placed on standby for fire suppression purposes. So I also want to add that all our expanded public works program full-time equivalents, all contract staff were placed on special leave, and they are being paid their salaries as it stands. In the second place, all staff granted permission to work from home were also instructed to record daily timesheets for the monitoring of productivity levels, and that is an ongoing process. Most activities on and off our reserve has taken place as close to normally as was allowed, with a limited number of staff present at the workplace. And these, of course, included biodiversity monitoring activities, maintenance work, general conservation activities, but then in particular, essential services such as fire suppression, the wildlife management and anti-poaching compliance and enforcement activities. These were all continued. Just by the way, we have had to contend with and report on 5 fires during the lockdown period. And then also in terms of the question whether or not we will, at what level of the risk-adjusted strategy will we return to work, like such as alien clearing and those things. I can confirm that we are awaiting guidance from our National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment from their Natural Resource Management Program on resuming alien clearing and fire management activities. I will deal with that in a little bit more detail at a later stage. Chair, the second question, whether or not Cape Nature is already incorporating the COVID-19 risks associated with infections in a strategy. I want to confirm on behalf of the CEO and the executive that Cape Nature has incorporated all risks associated with the COVID-19 lockdown into a business continuity plan, a full risk assessment, and a return to work standard operational guideline. All nationally promulgated instructions such as sanitizing, social distancing, and all of those are currently operational, and these documents are updated as and when new regulations and new instructions from national come through. In addition to this, an initial bulk purchase of personal protective equipment such as hand sanitizers and other safety equipment has been delivered, and as it stands, Cape Nature has also placed a further bulk order with the Chief Procurement Officer for additional PPE and equipment to ensure that staff can safely return to the office after lockdown, and we are currently awaiting delivery for that. And then just a final quick point to what extent Cape Nature has been able to work online or have virtual meetings in terms of having the ICT equipment and platforms. I want to confirm that Cape Nature has been using the internal ICT platforms and equipment since day one, and we have been online. We've had virtual meetings and our communications go out, as well as communication with our external stakeholders. Then I would like to then turn to the presentation on the screen again and to just run you through a number of interventions that we are experiencing in terms of the lockdown period and potentially what real and what potential impacts these could have. As you can see on screen, our ecological management in and around our nature reserves. Unfortunately, we have not been able to commence all our ecological projects because of the situation as far as lockdown is concerned. Things are obviously slowly getting back to normal from this week onwards, but these would be projects like our bird monitoring, post-fire monitoring, invasive alien plant assessments, and just general biodiversity data collection. As far as fire management and alien clearing is concerned, most of the 2019-20 fire season assessments have been completed. But I would like to point out that of particular concern to us at the moment is the closing window, the so-called closing window of opportunity to conduct fuel load reduction. And this is particularly in our fire ecological management strategy in terms of reducing fuel loads and also to do critically prescribed burns as needed. Maybe just a quick reminder that, for example, fynbos is a fire-driven ecosystem. Fynbos needs fire, so not all wildfires are bad. And if fynbos gets too old, fynbos will die. So therefore, fynbos must burn, and in certain areas we do prescribe burns as required. As you can also see in the second bullet, under the second point, Chair, we've unfortunately had limited to no work that has been done on fire breaks, and this has been related to alien clearing activities as well, which has also been temporarily stopped. You will see on the screen that contractors have been withdrawn from the field, and obviously we need catch-up plans to continue with this. I've put in brackets there just what I've mentioned earlier, also that we are awaiting post-lockdown instructions from our principals and from the funders in this particular point. Here, I'd like to, while I'm mentioning fire breaks, under the second bullet, I'd like to turn to the question around what is Cape Nature's policy on fire breaks and how effective are they, and is the cost maintaining fire breaks justifiable? So in response to that, I'd like to confirm that as manager of almost 1 million hectares of state-owned land, Cape Nature must, we don't have a choice, we must comply with the National Veld and Forest Fire Act of '98, and according to this act, landowners or land managers must prepare fire breaks on their side of a boundary where there is a reasonable risk of veld fire. You will be aware, Chair, that most of our nature reserves are have got fire risk inherent, and that is why we are compelled to do the fire breaks. And just to confirm that also, that according to the Cape Nature Veld Fire Management Policy, Cape Nature maintains our fire breaks annually between properties managed by us and those of adjacent landowners. These maintenance of the fire breaks are done according to a fire break maintenance register, and it is our opinion that the cost of maintaining these fire breaks are well justified, especially, and I'm saying that especially in light of the National Act and the potential legal liabilities due to not having or not maintaining fire breaks. So, Chair, to answer the question briefly, I think we do not have a choice and we do what we need to do. Unfortunately, I've just not had enough time to get the final statistics on how much and how many kilometers of fire break, but I can assure you that it's quite a sum of money that is spent, but it is really well justified, especially in terms of the legal liability that could arise in that regard. Here I'm turning over the page, and the next slide would be impact on conservation operations as far as marine protected areas and our compliance is concerned. I'd like to point out that our 5 marine protected areas are nationally funded from the Department Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. There are annual work plans, and unfortunately we are going to have to reschedule some of the Q1 deliverables because not all of these may have been completed. In terms of what Cape Nature's role and contribution is in terms of marine protected areas and also related to the compliance factor and whether or not Cape Nature inspectors are adequately equipped to assist with marine patrols, I would like to respond by saying is that Cape Nature, together with the South African Police Service Coastal Border Unit, as well as the Department of Environmental Affairs and Fisheries, the Fisheries Branch, and very often, I must note, in collaboration with the National Defence Force as well as Sand Parks, we regularly organize and execute Operation Pakisa coastal sting operations to deal with the threat of poaching along the coast, notably from the Roy Els area towards Pearly Beach. That is where the hottest of the hotspots are in terms of marine and coastal poaching. These operations are usually highly successful in creating a strong presence along the coast and to prevent poachers from going about their business. Chair, I would like to confirm that all Cape Nature EMIs are trained and equipped to enforce the full suite of legislation, and that would be the Protected Areas Act, the Biodiversity Act, the Integrated Coastal Management Act, the Nature Conservation Ordinance, and the Marine Living Resource Act in that regard. In addition, I would like to confirm that more than 90% of our Cape Nature field rangers and marine rangers are trained and appointed peace officers and fisheries control officers able to enforce the law. We are operational in all our coastal nature reserves, and where sting operations are executed, specific roles and functions are then assigned to the relevant agencies. So as far as compliance, point 4 is concerned, as you can see, I have noted that compliance patrols have been limited and centered around reserves known to be hotspots. We did manage to increase our coastal patrols, and marine poaching hotspots remain highly risky, as you would know that seaward entry is mostly used, and boat patrols could always only be launched through land-based observations. I would like to also add 2.4 in terms of compliance, that the question was posed earlier, why is it that fewer anti-poaching patrols were being conducted under level 5 lockdown when law enforcement was classified as essential service, and also what is the relationship between Cape Nature and the Green Scorpions, and how many qualified environmental inspectors are employed in the Western Cape. So let me respond by confirming that, as I have explained earlier, and due to the number of reduced regular staff at our workplaces, fewer patrols were scheduled. However, I would like to add and confirm that specific hotspots were identified, such as the Knasvlakte area in the Matsikama region, and most of our coastal reserves, namely Betty's Bay, Walker Bay, De Hoop, etc., where we have increased the number of patrols up to about 50% or more. And this became the focus then for anti-poaching and compliance activities. In fact, Chair, I would like to add a little bit of, I guess, good news from an environmental point of view, that on this last Thursday evening, on the 30th of April, 7 persons were apprehended in a sting operation in Bitterfontein in the Matsikama region, and in illegal possession of more than 9,000 succulent plants. Those were mainly, those of you who are familiar with the conophytiums, these little stone plants destined for the illegal succulent plant trade. This was a highly successful intervention that we did in conjunction with the South African Police Services Stock Theft Unit of Malmesbury, and this case has been postponed until July 2020. Just to confirm also in terms of the number of environmental inspectors, Cape Nature, as it is, or as it stands, has 56 formally trained and appointed environmental management inspectors, or so-called green scorpions. Chair, I'd like to maybe just quickly interrupt myself by saying is that the question is, what is the relationship between Cape Nature and the green scorpions? I think the simple answer to that is any environmental management inspector that has let's call it a card carrying EMI, is basically a green scorpion in inverted commas. So we do have the 56 formally trained and appointed EMIs. And then in addition, Chair, for the Western Cape Province, our Department of Environmental Affairs Development Planning currently has 72 trained and appointed EMIs, and I've established that the Western Cape local authorities have a total of 88 EMIs. So, Chair, this is a total of at least 216 green scorpions in the Western Cape. And I think that stands us in good stead in terms of having a good presence and ability and capability and capacity to do environmental law enforcement and compliance. Unfortunately, Chair, the figure for sandparks and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment is unknown at this stage. I guess we can get that if it's required. Here, I would like to move on then to the next slide. In terms of Cape Nature's maintenance of infrastructure, during the lockdown period, we have had skeleton staff operating in our nature reserves. As I've indicated earlier, we have managed to maintain buildings, roads, hiking trails of critical nature, but unfortunately we had to stop the planned contractor teamwork on our roads and on the hiking trails because of the withdrawal of all contractors from our nature reserves under the level 5 lockdown period. As I've mentioned, we are slowly getting back into our stride again, and we are currently looking into bringing back the contractors on a regular basis. But that is work that is in progress at the moment. Here, as far as alien clearing and special projects for integrated catchment management is concerned, I'd like to confirm that our working for wetlands projects, especially around rehabilitation of our wetlands and ecological infrastructure, our integrated catchment management teams, and especially our natural resource management projects, the EPWP projects, alien clearing, fire break making, laundry service, and so on, are currently on hold because of the lockdown period. As I've mentioned, we are looking and waiting for guidelines from national also to carry on and bring back the contractors into operations again. As you can see, most of our conservation partnerships in this regard are centered around environmental programs and contractors. and teams clearing invasive alien plants, cutting fire breaks. So obviously these partnerships would need to resume again. When I go to the next slide, Chair, you will see again under special projects, one of our major partnerships at the moment, the Greater Cape Town Water Fund, is a partnership-driven project in response to the recent drought situations. Now, this is a fantastic program at the moment and project that we've launched in collaboration with City of Cape Town, the Nature Conservancy, Working on Fire, High Altitude team, as well as WWF South Africa. And unfortunately, we've had significant delays in this regard due to the contracts being placed on hold. And unfortunately, there has also been a compromised ability to maintain the momentum for these alien clearing operations as per the 5-year strategic plan. But as I've confirmed, that we are now in the process of actually reacting or reactivating these projects so that we can actually move on from there. So, Chair, I would like to then move on to the next slide, where I would like to confirm once again, as far as the impact of the lockdown period and staff operating remotely concerned, we have continued with the technical preparation for 3 of our protected area management plans. Those would be the Groot Winterhoek Nature Reserve, the Hexrivier complex, as well as the Rivier Sonder End complex of nature reserves. The technical preparation and the background information has already been is steadily being worked at. But unfortunately, our internal and external stakeholder engagement sessions have had to be postponed, and obviously this has a knock-on effect on meeting subsequent deadlines. However, as soon as we are back into full operation, these catch-up plans will then be activated, and hopefully we will, and the chances are good, I'm relatively comfortable that we will be able to meet these deadlines. In terms of, Chair, I think one of the main impacts that we've had on our business is the situation around stakeholder engagement. As you can note, the lockdown has resulted in a shutdown of planned stakeholder engagement processes, including but not limited to, in the first place, our protected area advisory committees, then also environmental education workshops and field trips with local communities and schools. We've had also to stop with stakeholder engagement with municipalities, NGOs, local communities, and especially our coastal and estuary forums. And then also, I think as it relates to protected area management plans, the external stakeholder engagement has had to stop. One of the, in the second bullet on this screen, Chair, you will note that our biodiversity stewardship program is also impacted. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get out into the field to make contact with our biodiversity stewardship and private landowner projects, but this is also to resume as soon as we are able to get back into the field. And then, of course, we have maintained our services related to biodiversity permitting. This has been provided by means of remote support, and a number of permits have been issued in this regard. And I can also just confirm that our permit section they are all working remotely, and they have continued their service delivery to members of the public, for example, the game sector or the captivity sector, and we remain in that we remain active in that regard. Then, as far as socio-economic impact is concerned, I think a lot can be said about that. But I think, in short, I try to summarize it that our small, medium, and micro enterprises and our other contractors that we have been using and that we have been partnering with for alien clearing, fire break maintenance, fire suppression, laundry services, security services, on have obviously been impacted in terms of having to withdraw most of them from the field. Obviously, this has a knock-on effect and an impact on livelihoods and revenue for these people, and also the families that depend on them. But fortunately, as I've mentioned, our EPWP participants in the contracted positions, they have been at home However, they have received payment, but unfortunately they have not been able to supply the services to the protected areas. And again, as I've mentioned earlier, in other instances, these people will slowly be returning to work under the lockdown release regulations, and we hope to see everybody back into action as soon as we can. Chair, the last slide on conservation operations is the following one, and this is you will recall that I mentioned right at the start that Cape Nature, we both work inside our protected areas, but also not only inside our protected areas, but also outside of our protected areas into the landscape. And the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown period up to now has also had quite a number of impacts, including, as I've mentioned, fewer stewardship negotiations, fewer compliance and enforcement criminal investigations, fewer anti-poaching patrols. But remember what I said, we have actually increased in certain areas. There's, of course, also advisory services to landowners and issuing of biodiversity permits have continued, but unfortunately we've not been able to continue with physical inspections. We have also continued with human-wildlife conflict and essential services in the wildlife management realm. And just to confirm that over the last 3 or so weeks, we've had quite an interesting number of human-wildlife conflict incidences in the Piketberg area, where 1 or 2 leopards have actually gone rogue and have started catching sheep and so on. But we have dealt with that successfully as well. And then, of course, I think in the outside of our protected areas, I think the main impact has been that we've unfortunately had much less stakeholder engagement that we would have wished for. Chair, as you have requested to also give an indication in terms of the impact on Cape Nature's ecotourism and access situation, here with a few points, and then I would like to just add 1 or 2 of the additional questions just now. First of all, the tourism sector recovery is obviously very delayed. I think the forecast for revenue and the non-realization for the 2021 financial year, not only for Cape Nature, but I think essentially for all the tourism and ecotourism sector, will really have a significant impact. For Cape Nature, we have decided that for the short to medium term, we will be focusing on the domestic market, and there we are already gearing up towards engaging with stakeholders and looking into how we can actually post-lockdown bring in visitors who are looking for places to go. And I think we are in the third place, we are looking at the so-called emergence of a new customer. We are predicting that perhaps to a large extent our visitors that will henceforth be looking for chalets or for camping sites in our nature reserves would most likely concentrate on the whole health and safety and the social distancing situation. And I do think that we have got fantastic opportunities to assist in that regard. As you have noted in the media as well, the marketing responses towards the domestic versus international is also quite significant. We are also looking at confirming and actually emphasizing the message of please postpone your visits, do not cancel them. And I will say a few more things later in terms of what particular financial impact that we are foreseeing having that. Obviously, also in terms of our public-private partnership and our concessions that we run on 1 or 2, 3 of our reserves, would obviously take a knock. But it is also this period would also then allow us to look into doing a little bit of maintenance, proper maintenance with not having any visitors there, as well as upgrades that need to take place. And Chair, I will get to the upgrades later as the committee has also asked for. At this stage, Chair, I would like to also then just add one or two of the additional questions. The question was asked, are you confident that Cape Nature will be ready to respond by opening reservations for tourists within hours of government announcing level 1? By how much would the call centre's capacity be increased? And are we able to accept reservations once reserves are allowed again? Our response to that is as follows. Our call centre has continued operating throughout the lockdown period, all the way from day one, to assist clients with inquiries, postponements, new bookings and cancellations. The whole of the call centre has been working remotely, and we are confident that we have sufficient staff in the call centre to deal with an expected increase in the reservations, and we are encouraging clients to utilize our online booking facilities. In that regard, then, Chair, there would be no need to increase the call centre capacity at this stage. The second question that was asked in terms of ecotourism and access related matters was the additional question in terms of the development of overnight accommodation for multi-day hiking in the Hottentots Holland Nature Reserve, which may include construction of additional mountain huts, and if so, where and why is the Sphinx Trail currently closed, and what is needed to reopen that? Our response in that regard is, Chair, that additional overnight huts are planned as part of, and once the master plan for the expanded development of Hottentots Holland Nature Reserve is completed. This plan is currently under review in this financial year, and it is scheduled for implementation in the 2021-22 fiscal year. Currently, some of the forestry exit land, the ex-MTO land, was identified as potential for additional overnight accommodation. Chair, I would like to add there that if it comes to the construction of new overnight huts, wherever in the reserves and so on, obviously the full EIA regulations will kick in, and that is not negotiable. We will have to go that route. And then also, I would like to confirm that existing mountain huts will receive a major upgrade as part of the 2021-22 financial year APP, and the upgrades obviously will be restricted to the existing footprints. So the question around why the Sphinx Trail is currently closed. The trail was closed as part of planned maintenance during the 2019-20, the previous financial year, but we are still waiting for the delivery of some signage that was ordered just before the lockdown. That signage is still outstanding, and upon receipt and following lockdown, the trail will be opened again. So then I'm turning to the next question in terms of briefing the committee, and I'd like to look at the potential impact on the financial position and the ecotourism situation as far as Cape Nature is concerned. You will note that in terms of the regulations, currently all tourism facilities are closed until lockdown level 1 will be announced. And this obviously has a significant impact on our revenue, our ecotourism revenue, as well as financial position. And we are expected to lose during the Q1 and Q2 period of up to 17 million rand, which is about 40% of our budgeted revenue for the 2020-21, the current financial year. When we looked at annual trends, the indication is that fortunately during winter months, less revenue is generated, and therefore the impact of on the revenue due to the COVID-19 lockdown is lessened to a certain extent. Due to the strategic financial management that we have implemented, the impact of lesser revenue and potential reductions can be buffered, and in that regard, the entity completed our organizational design process in 2019, which focused on repurposing of staff to critical vacant positions and implementing stricter conditions as to which posts will be filled. And we have a vacancy list that is reviewed on a monthly basis in terms of the filling of vacancies. Chair, the second part of the impact on the financial position, as you can see there, is that we are of the opinion that our investment in cloud-based ICT services and the reduction of hardware costs will also be a good thing and which will lessen the impact. And then, of course, reduction in our variable costs, such as travel and cleaning, will affect savings. I have mentioned, as in response to one of the questions, that our ICT platforms that we use for virtual meetings and engagement with stakeholders is really also affecting quite a lot of savings, especially in terms of not having to travel to meetings and all of those things. And then, of course, in the last place there, cash reserves that have been built up over the last few years from interest income and surplus revenue will also be able to be reallocated and reprioritized as we move into this period of the significant impact. Then I would like to then move to the next part of the committee briefing. And the question was in terms of role clarification regarding a number of stakeholders within the environmental sector, especially in the Western Cape province, and also as it relates to Cape Nature. So I'm going to mention just a number of the stakeholders, and maybe just to clear up who's who in the zoo, if I can put it that way. So you will see that obviously the first foremost, the national stakeholder is our National Department of now the Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. The department obviously used to be the Department of Environmental Affairs, then it turned into Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, splitting the forestry and fisheries branches off the agriculture. Agriculture is now on its own with land reform, and environment, forestry and fisheries are now our national department under Minister Creasy, and has the mandate for conservation and state-owned commercial forestry in South Africa. Sandbox, as no doubt you are aware of, is a national public entity of the department with a conservation mandate. And of course, Cape Nature, as I've also mentioned earlier, is a provincial public entity with a biodiversity conservation mandate in the Western Cape. As it relates to forestry and commercial forestry within the Western Cape and in the South African context, Chair, I'd like to point out that the so-called SAFCOL, or the South African Forestry Company, is a state-owned enterprise mandated to conduct forestry business, including timber harvesting, processing, and related activities. I need to point out that SAFCOL is primarily focused in the Mpumalanga and Limpopo areas, and not so much in the Western Cape province. If I turn to MTO Forestry, Mountains to Ocean, I think that is the acronym. Chair, they were previously known as Cape Pine, but they are a private company who is conducting commercial forestry in the Western and the Eastern Cape. I believe that the SAFCOL, or the South African Forestry Companies, have got a minority investment in MTO. And I also need to point out that the Jonkershoek, Kleitjieskraal, Grabouw, Jonkersberg, Bergplaas, Umtini, Buffelsneck, those are the kind of the main commercial plantations that we're talking about. So MTO and obviously closer to home. MTO is the closest to home, if I can put it that way. And specifically as it relates to the question in the briefing in terms of the Jonkershoek gate closure, MTO and Cape Nature, we have had a number of interactions about the whole issue around the Jonkershoek gate closure. We have on record 30 interested and affected parties and stakeholder groups that have been identified. We've registered them. Unfortunately, Chair, due to the COVID-19 lockdown period, stakeholder meeting, that particular stakeholder meeting that we organized for the end of March had to be postponed until further notice. And of course, also the reserve and the plantation is closed. No visitors are allowed. So in that regard, things have not moved forward, but we have plans afoot to establish a formal Cape Nature Protected Area Advisory Committee for Jonkershoek. And we will, as soon as the lockdown levels will allow, we will then proceed with the stakeholder engagement as far as the Jonkershoek situation is concerned. Chair, I would like to then just briefly also mention that or add 2 or 3 of the questions that was posed yesterday in terms of issues that relate to this relationship, and also about being responsible for maintenance of infrastructure, security, access control, where both conservation and plantation activities are being conducted in the same or adjacent areas. So I'd like to respond by saying is that under normal circumstances, each entity, for example, MTO and Cape Nature or Sandparks, whatever the case, each entity would take responsibility for its own maintenance of its infrastructure, security, and access. But in case of Jonkershoek, this is, I think, I stand corrected, but I think it's more or less the only place where both conservation and plantation activities are conducted in the same area. A formal agreement was reached with MTO that because access to the Jonkershoek Nature Reserve, that is for Cape Nature, is via a commercial plantation, MTO would then control the access. As far as maintenance of infrastructure is concerned, MTO then also remains responsible for the maintenance of the Jonkershoek circular route within the commercial plantation part, up to the point where it crosses over into Cape Nature property, and from there we do some maintenance in that regard. Chair, the next question was about what are the contractual responsibilities of MTO when, for example, they exit an area, and this is in terms of maintenance of infrastructure, alien control, fire breaks, and so on. So when they exit an area previously used for forestry, and are they contributing to rehabilitation work after their exit? So I'd like to respond that the formal situation is that several of these forestry exit areas have already been handed over to MTO, have been handed over by MTO to the National Department, Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. So when MTO handed these exit areas over to the department, it had to conform to certain specifications. And those specifications were that the area needed to be cleared of aliens, fire breaks must have been in place, etc., all the maintenance in place. It then became, after the handover in that condition, it then became the responsibility of the landowner, by name the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, as well as the land manager at that stage, Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, and in particularly the forestry branch, to maintain these areas or to assign it to a new manager. But unfortunately, in several cases, this assignment has not happened, and the maintenance of invasion, obviously ongoing invasion by alien plants, has not continued. And in our opinion, in particular, the forestry branch would probably be best placed to advise on this particular matter. Here and then, I would like to just also confirm that in terms of role clarification regarding stakeholders, and also the follow-up question whether or not and how and in what manner are disputes between various entities operating in this field are settled, and how do we ensure there's no gaps or duplication. Here, our advice is that the environmental sector mandates, the mandates and responsibilities are guided primarily by constitutional mandates of different spheres of government and the powers, functions, and duties set out in the environmental framework legislation, which obviously includes the National Environmental Management Act and all the CMAs as well as provincial legislation, as well as bylaws. So the sector is coordinated via the MinMec and MinTech coordinating mechanisms, which enables strategic and annual planning, as well as legislative reform process, as well as the identification of conflicts or gaps. So in this particular regard, Chair, where specific challenges or disputes arise, these are usually elevated through the MinTech and MinMec structures, and where required, task teams are appointed to advise on solutions. Obviously, common mechanisms employed also include the development of implementation protocols under the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act, in which detailed roles and responsibilities for delivery processes are negotiated and agreed by the parties. So at an organizational level within the Western Cape environmental mandate, departments develop a service delivery model which ensures that the legal mandate can be delivered. And in the Western Cape, for example, there is an agreed service delivery model for the biodiversity and coastal management functions that has ensured the effective and efficient allocation between the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning and its public entity, Cape Nature. Chair, I'd like to then turn to the second last, I think, yes, the second last aspect of the briefing of the committee, and that is the question around law enforcement and dealing with transgressions. As I have noted earlier, and I'm just maybe repeating some of it here, but just to confirm for the committee, generally during the lockdown period, because of the lower number of field staff that were in operation, we had generally fewer anti-poaching or compliance reserves, compliance patrols in the region of about 80%. However, we have increased the number of patrols in our coastal reserves and marine protected areas by our EMIs and fishery control officers, and I'm glad to report that we've had good successes. We've had a number of spot fines issued, and people handed over to South African police services and so on. So we've had success in that regard. And then, as I've also mentioned earlier, in the Matsikama landscape, we also upped the number of patrols because we know that the Knysvlakte region is a poaching hotspot, especially for succulent plants, unique lizards, tortoises, dwarf adders that live there. And so we have been concentrating specifically on gathering intelligence on succulent plant poaching with the South African Police Service Stock Theft Unit. And Chair, as I've reported earlier, there was last Thursday night, there was the arrest of those 7 individuals for poaching all of those Conophytum succulent plants. So we have reported over the last few weeks at least 15 to 20 transgressions in terms of the ordinance, the Marine Living Resource Act, and COVID-19 lockdown regulations. Our peace officers have also been able and assisting the police services and the other regulators in terms of apprehending people that are walking and hiking where they shouldn't be. And Chair, specifically during April, we've had the case that in the wilderness, in the Cederberg wilderness area, 3 groups of hikers have been apprehended, found to have illegally accessed the Cederberg wilderness area. Vehicles, drivers, hikers were apprehended. We are glad to also report that some of these incidents were the result of community or members of the community alerting Cape Nature Reserve Management and our anti-poaching patrols. These people have been turned over to the police, and fines and warnings have also been issued in that regard. Here I'm almost done, and I would like to just very briefly, I don't think we have time and it's no to go into all kinds of detail, but I would like to, the first of 3 slides, indicate to you the status of upgrading and maintenance projects, particularly our tourism facilities for the short term. And you will note that we have 5 projects there: Grootvadersbos campsite upgrade, the wastewater treatment facility at Vrolikheid Nature Reserve, the penguin pool upgrade at Bird Island, which is in Lammerts Bay, the Green Conference Center in Vrolikheid Nature Reserve, and the Kogelberg Phase 2 additions that we are, as we speak, waiting that these are completed. I think Kogelberg Phase 2 has basically been completed. There are a few more things to finish off, and the rest of the projects are basically on the ground, site handover, and so on. And the work will resume as soon as we are able to proceed. In the medium term, Chair, to be procured and hopefully to be completed during this financial year, 2020-21 still, is conversion of the old truck shed at Gokama Nature Reserve as a 12-sleeper backpackers accommodation, renewable energy provision for tourist cottages at Algeria in the Cederberg, renewable energy provision for eco cabins and staff houses at Rochaipan on the west coast, the replacement and upgrade of the current low water bridge and the sluices at Algeria campsite. Some of the members who have been at Algeria will know the famous Laagwaterbrug at the swemgat, and that will be that low water bridge needs to be completely replaced. Upgrading of the internal road of Grootvadersbos and the upgrade and water reticulation at Potberg in the Hoop Nature Reserve, general maintenance and improvements at various other reserves. And then I think the last is the Anysberg water generation, installation of atmospheric water generations to ensure continued water supply and the reopening of the reserve. So Anysberg Nature Reserve has been closed for a number of months prior to lockdown already because of the water situation. They have technically run out of water, groundwater as well, and something serious need to be put in place there. Here, the second last slide is that that the longer term projects to be planned and to be researched in 2020-21 in this financial year would be the Nemont Nature Reserve Tourism Development, Grootvadersbos Skywalk, the Stony Point Tourism Development. There is an extension there of the boardwalk, upgrading the Welcome and Education Center, the Waarneyskraals Tourism Development. There we need to do some serious work in terms of erosion control, wayfinding, access control at Waarneyskraals, improve visitor safety and enhance experience. And then, as you can see there, second last, Chair, the Holland Nature Reserve Tourism Master Plan, research, design and upgrade for multi-day hiking and mountain biking, visitor reception, and so on, overnight accommodation. And then finally, a viability assessment of the facility that we have now taken over in Wolwekloof, which is near Ceres, between Tilburg and Ceres, investigating and analyzing the development and revenue generation opportunities at Wolwekloof. This is an old resort-style site that we have taken over, and with many exciting opportunities in that regard. Chair, I would like to acknowledge contributions by my colleagues, especially from the Office of the CEO and from our Executive Director, Ecotourism and Access, as well as our Chief Financial Officer. And with all of that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bart. That was quite a wide-ranging, because your briefing was so wide, and I appreciate the vast amount of knowledge that you shared with us.
Thank you,
Honourable
Chair.
members, as I indicated, it's now your opportunity. If you would like to pose further questions, if you would just quickly name yourself, and then I'll make a list of speakers.
Chairperson Deirdre Bartman.
Matlodi Maseko.
Thank you.
Peter Murray, Freedom Front.
Welcome, Honourable Murray. You're number 3 in line. Anybody else?
Number 4, Pet Moran.
Honourable Moran, welcome. Shall I close for now? Thank you. Then Honorable Bartman.
Chairperson, Shirinia.
Yes.
May I just ask Dr. Bart to please just unshare his screen again so that the presentation is removed?
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
There we go.
pointing that out. Honorable Bartman, we're listening.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm not going to put the video on just so that the connection is a little bit stable. I would like to refer to slide 5, speaking about the alien clearing that was temporarily stopped. At the end of last year, I requested Cape Nature to come and do an assessment of the Buffelsrivier in Laingsburg with the aim of the possibility of helping to clear rivers. Obviously, Cape Nature does not actually clear rivers on private land, it is the department. The reason that I originally requested the assessment was obviously because the plants are growing in the river, and if it floods, those plants could block the water from flowing as well as wash by arable agricultural land, and it also changes how the river is flowing. And firstly, I would just like to say thank you for Cape Nature for coming out so quickly when I reported the matter at the time. I then contacted the minister and I received feedback from Cape Nature that we have to speak to the department. They gave us 3 options in terms of its 2 non-mechanical options to clear the riverbed. It was the Buffelsrivier and 1 mechanical option. Now, the 3rd mechanical option requires permission in terms of NEMA. But unfortunately in Laingsburg, before the coronavirus occurred, the farmers were already hard hit by the drought and there was absolutely no funding for clearing the riverbeds. They simply cannot afford it. We are now approaching winter and the situation is being exacerbated by the coronavirus now. I have been working with the Laingsburg Sakekamers and farmers on this issue, been doing home visits, seeing the riverbeds for myself, taking photos, driving through it, and the Sakekamer has now assisted me with organizing within the farming community so that we can know exactly which areas need clearing and assistance. Essentially, it's like a map that we are creating at the moment so we can give the department accurate information. So you see slide 5 is very concerning to me because it means that alien clearing can't happen at the moment, especially with winter coming out. And my questions are essentially is, what level will alien clearing continue to? I know that Cape Nature does not assist with river clearing on private land unless the department is involved. So what happens if the river clearing needs to be done on the public land? Can Cape Nature assist us with the public land area in the meantime while one waits for assistance? And then the 3rd part is whether Cape Nature and the department could assist with almost like an infographic regarding how people can request alien vegetation clearing. And in that way, we can then assist our communities, especially in the rural farming communities, because this is a food security issue, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I do have a lot of questions, but I think after Member Bartman has given some of the questions that I want to give, I'm just going to give a generic questions that I feel I have to ask. I just want to find out one thing. My understanding is that the APP and the strategic plan, it sort of was instigated, one of the instigators, it has to be the drought. And now hearing about the alien clearing, that it was sort of put on hold because of the coronavirus, and that not stopping the problem that we're still continuing to have of the drought. To what an extent is the entities plans changing to accommodate, because now it's not business as usual that we are concentrating also on economy and the drought to try to get the balance. You are adding the 3rd component of the pandemic to say, how do you maneuver yourself around? So what are the changes that you are implementing? Because I tend to believe it cannot be business as usual, that we have also as an oversight component try to adapt to what are you bringing that will be new to make those changes in your APPs for us to do an oversight. And another thing that maybe the last one that I want to know is, I think the fourth industrial revolution is going to play a major role from the plans that you said the management is working from home, and how, to what an extent are you investing in there that it should be your new normal going forward, because we don't know until when is that are you going to operate in that fashion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then Honorable Murray.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you very much, and good day, members. I have a problem. I have a problem with what I've heard. You know, you say that COVID-19 regulations have had negative effects on your patrols, etc., and in actually employing more people to do the work. It's like saying I'm going to do away with cops if crime increases. I want to read to you a simple letter which I received, and this says, melkhoutbome is beskermde bome. En die voorsitter van die Skulphoek aksiegroep kry geen ondersteuning van die munisipaliteit, van Hermanus, 'n munisipale bestuurder, burgemeester en speaker om die onwettige verwydering van bome stop te sit en die skuldige partye te vervolg nie. The issue here is we have a situation where UNESCO itself has declared Milkwood's Reserve as a protected area for the milkwood trees and forests there. And at the moment, although there's been several complaints to remove the illegal land occupiers that chop down these trees, nothing has been done to stop and prosecute any of these people. Did COVID-19 give lawlessness now a free hand? And as COVID-19 put handcuffs on our effective protection of our forests? I want to answer, because I'm going onto social media after this and give the people that's very much upset a full report of the response which I have received. Is poaching also now allowed because you have fewer patrol boats? Is this what we're saying? How we are solving with regulations the effects of COVID-19? The people are fed up. It's enough if they're hungry, if they still feel unprotected. And every time regulations are passed that does not protect them, protect their environment, protect their income, protect their work, we are heading for huge unrest in this country. So I would like to know why your work of Cape Nature is not considered so important as an essential service that you receive more money rather than less, more patrols rather than less patrols. I would like to answer, because the people out there are waiting. They want to save the milkwood forest. And we are allowing people who squat there, land invaders, to break the very rules that says there should not be land invasion and there should be social distancing. We're aggravating this matter by allowing them to chop off forests and using it for firewood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Murray, and then Honorable Maran.
Chair, thanks very much, Chair. Chair, mine is not necessarily a question, because my understanding of this report, Chair, it's two parts. The last part deals with a status report of short-term to long-term projects and how it's been affected or might be affected by COVID-19. And also, Chair, the first part is also a report in terms of projects and how it's been affected, Chair, and also the operations of the department under the lockdown rules. Now, our understanding is, or my understanding is, Chair, that the department or Cape Nature has been affected by lockdown. Some things can be done under a certain level, some things can't. We have just been moved from level 5 to level 4. And if I understand, basically to present it correctly, some of the issues may only happen under level 1. So I think we should appreciate, Chair, the report that we have received from Cape Nature. But also, Chair, as we move from a higher level to a lower level, that Cape Nature just keep us, take us into confidence and give us another report in terms which says that in this level we could not have done that. We have moved to a lower level, and therefore we are allowed now to do certain things. The understanding, Chair, my understanding is also that under this lockdown, especially when it comes to the high levels, certain things won't be possible to be done. Now, obvious there will be some increase in terms of criminalities, which might occur, Chair, and how the law enforcement agencies will deal with it. It's up to them, Chair. So from my side, Chair, I appreciate the information that we have received in terms of what can be done and what can't be done. We must also accept that there will be some criminalities, but the law enforcement agents should be able to deal with that, Chair. And as I've said, as we're going to move forward and as we're going to move to a lower level, that Cape Nature just keep us into confidence what can and what can't be done. We know that it affects a lot of people. We know it affects people on the ground. There is some unemployment, as been said, EPWP, those workers are at home. But I think, Chair, the lockdown and the rules and also the levels that we are currently under with is to protect human lives. That's basically it, to protect human lives first. So, Chair, from my side, thanks very much to Cape Nature.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. If I may just say, Dr. Bart, it seems to me there are a few difficult things for Cape Nature. The first one is nature is not standing still. Nature is not under lockdown. And as Honourable Bartman has said, the plants are growing, rivers might be blocked during future floods, etc. You've spoken about fire breaks and the risks and so on. Would you mind responding just, to the need? Isn't some of the work that members refer to, can't it be classified as essential services? And then secondly, I think the media, who's also part of our meeting, would perhaps be interested in your reference to the human-wildlife conflict and the leopard in Piketberg. I don't think that's been picked up by the mainstream media. So if you would mind just also giving us a little bit more background regarding that. And then thirdly, I think with the lockdown and many people going hungry at this point in time, one could perhaps expect more and more people to go into our nature areas to look for buchu and other medicinal plants which can be converted into cash. And perhaps in answering that, you can also refer to your responsibility in terms of Honourable Marais' reference to the milkwood forest there in the Hermanus area. If I can give over to you, Dr. Bart.
Chair, thank you very much. I can only confirm what you've just said, that in our experience, yes, nature doesn't stop for COVID-19 lockdown. And one of the concerns obviously is because of the fact that Cape Nature has not been able to provide a full-blown alien clearing action or services. Obviously our concern is that the aliens will keep on growing, and we'll obviously have to do something about that. I would like to then just start with the first question, Honourable Bartman. Thank you very much about the river clearing. What we did was, at the time of your request, we assisted our local officials at the Arneisberg Nature Reserve to assist in that regard. And I think the three options that we have offered, I think the one was burning, and the second one was burning and grazing The second was by means of herbicide control. And then the third option was the mechanical clearing, as we've pointed out. The first two, I think, doesn't really need environmental authorization. The mechanical clearing would, if it triggers the environmental regulations. However, to answer your question, Honourable Bartman, in terms of the clearing of aliens on public land, in that regard, I take it that it is most likely local authority nature reserve or local authority land, as well as if there are, on private land and so on. I would like to offer assistance in that regard, ma'am, that we can also, we have in our biodiversity stewardship program, we have a lot of information leaflets in terms of how to deal with fire, how to deal with alien clearing, how to organize these things. And I think that we would be able, and that's I think maybe my short answer, is to assist in advising private landowners and the local authority in terms of how to go about getting, for example, funding to allow for the clearing and the appointment of contractors, preferably local contractors who can actually assist in that regard. So if that answers the question, I think that will be something that I can take from the request and then follow up on that. The second point, Honourable Maseko, thank you very much. Yes, I think everybody would agree that the extent of the excessive drought that we had was really far-reaching, and the reason why, and I would like to confirm that the reason why the big project was started, that special project by City of Cape Town, ourselves, WWF, and also the Nature Conservancy, was exactly focused on, first of all, the national strategic water source areas that we have in the Western Cape. And if you look at the map in the vicinity of the Theewaterskloof Dam, that whole catchment is very, very heavily and very densely invaded by invasive alien plants. And that has become the top priority for clearing in terms of the mountain catchment, or the mountain then producing more water into the dam, so that City of Cape Town can produce more bulk water for sale to authorities, and eventually users like me can have more water in the tap. So I think I would like to confirm that as part of the prioritization and seeing what we can carry on, there is a reprioritization plan, not plan, there are now planning done in terms of how to, as soon as lockdown will allow contractors back into the field, how soon can we implement these catch-up plans? I have it on good authority, Chairperson, and maybe hopefully it also answers the wider question, is that under lockdown level 4, we are allowed to get contractors back into field. We are working with the National Department as we speak. We've also received guidance in terms of, unfortunately, some budget cuts, and also, so we have to reorganize our plans, and but we are looking at getting contractors back into the field. This last week, we have heard from the Working on Fire high altitude teams. Now, these are people that are trained to work in high altitudes in the upper levels of the mountains in terms of clearing trees, pine trees and acacia and all of those things. They have already requested getting back into the field. And I think maybe just a final thought on that is that obviously, if we have to allow people, and if we want to or need to allow contractors back into the field, obviously the COVID-19 lockdown regulations in terms of social distancing, transport regulations, sanitizing, all of those things will have to be observed. I think that will also then have an influence in terms of how soon and how many and how effective we can get contractors back into the field. So I do hope that those plans are then going to be instrumental in allowing us, the contractors, back into the field. Chair, I'd like to respond to Honourable Marais' question around the negative impact in the Skalkhoek Hermanus area, which is obviously a serious matter. The situation has arose that we have also advised our department in this regard, in terms of the clearing of milkout trees or milkwood trees. The situation is, as far as the legislation is concerned, the milkwood tree is a protected tree that is listed under agricultural legislation. So therefore, and also it is a listed protected forestry tree. So under the Forest Act and under the Agricultural Act, that is where the clearing or the unnecessary killing or uprooting or killing of milkwood trees, that's where the regulatory part of the situation comes in. However, we have also, I have it on good authority that the chairperson of, I think it's that Hermanus new precinct or the New Harbour precinct chairperson has been in contact with the National Department of Environmental Affairs and Forestry branch, a specific deputy director in terms of compliance. And I have seen over the last 2-week correspondence that he is dealing with this matter in terms of submitting something to the minister's office. So at this stage, I think from Cape Nature's side, we have assisted in providing advice and possible solutions. Although, as Honourable Marais has pointed out, there is also primarily a land invasion situation that I do believe it's within the mandate of the other prosecuting authorities or regulating authorities. So, but we are still in a position to provide advice in that regard, and I think that would be my answer in that regard. I would then just finally like to respond to Honourable Madam's statement. Honourable Madam, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think we are doing what we can, and hopefully the report that I've presented to the committee indicates that we are serious in terms of maintaining our presence in the field, and also not only maintaining our presence, but also to provide essential services in this regard, and that would be fire suppression, anti-poaching, wildlife management, and all of those things. So I thank you for that, and I do believe that it is within our capacity to keep the committee posted on the ongoing relaxation, hopefully the ongoing relaxation of the levels or of the lockdown levels as we proceed. And I would certainly relay this message to the CEO, and I'm pretty sure that she will support that in terms of a follow-up progress report to the committee. Chair, then with your on your request, very briefly, 2 issues in terms of the damage-causing animals or the human-wildlife conflict situation. I would like to respond that we are, as you have also pointed out, nature doesn't stand still. So life in the Piketberg has continued, and unfortunately there is a situation where 1 or 2 leopards that are resident leopards in the Piketberg has actually turned their attention to domestic stock. This is an ongoing situation that Cape Nature, together with landowners and other particular more scientific and technical partners, are keeping an eye on. In this particular regard, this leopard that was caught was responsible for stock losses, and the leopard was eventually trapped or caught in a trap cage. It was put under anesthesia. It was not put down. That's the wrong word. It was. But it was made to sleep, and it was investigated and examined by a veterinarian. There was no physical problem with the condition of the leopard, and therefore the decision was, in that regard, to translocate the leopard to another area where there are either very few or no leopards, and where it could be finding a new home range on. That has happened, and currently the movement of this leopard is being tracked as we speak. Yeah, and then I just think in terms of the final point that you made in terms of potential illegal access to nature reserves to nature reserves for other purposes and so on. And again, also as it relates to Honourable Marais' question in terms of patrols, we have literally done what we could with the available staff members that have been on duty to up the number of patrols, especially in the hotspots, as I've indicated. And
is that on a virtual meeting go? Okay, sure, sharp.
And
is that the minister speaking?
Sorry, I have muted Honourable Maran.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, just to continue. So in other words, I think our focus is exactly on upping the number of patrols and our presence in these hotspot areas. And our reserve staff, of course, also are looking into these areas, and especially in the area of the Boland Mountains where there are medicinal plants and so on. We've had some successes there, especially in certain areas. So I cannot agree more that we need to put more patrols on the ground. We are doing what we can, and as I've confirmed, from this week onwards, with more and more staff returning to and compliance, including compliance staff returning to the workplace, we would be able to increase the number of patrols. So, Chair, I think with that I will conclude.
Thank you, Dr. Bart. Honourable members, I give you another opportunity either to do a follow-up or new questions.
Peter Marais, Freedom Front, please.
Honourable Marais, you're up first.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, yes. I've never in my life heard an answer which in effect is a non-answer. The question I asked was not answered. I wanted to know certain things, why they don't act. And I got from Dr. Bart here a reply saying, I have advised them. Who did you advise and what was the advice? The people don't want advice. They want action because the power sits with you. So what advice could you have given them if they say stop the invasion of the milkwood forest, stop the chopping down of the trees, which is a protected species, please send patrols there, and you say, I gave them advice. They want action. So what action are you prepared to take? And if you give advice, who did you give advice to? There's the municipality involved of Hermanus who does nothing. There's a national minister. Who did you give advice to and what was the advice? I would like to know.
Thank you, Honourable Marais. Any other members? None?
Sorry, Chair, can
Yes.
I come in?
Seku, yes.
Okay,
Honourable.
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I just want to find out just the last question from me. With the postpone, don't cancel tourism pledge, to what an extent does the Cape Nature feels that after this corona maybe it will resuscitate the operations to the full, and if they feel that is going to happen, how is that going to, because now the strategy for now, or the what do I call it, the message for now of postpone, don't cancel, it's giving hope that everything is going to be okay, but we don't know when is that going to happen. So how are they holding to those visitors to make sure that we continue with revenue generation from the international market?
Good, thank you very much, Honourable Seku.
Chair?
Honourable Maran, is your voice?
Yeah, it's my voice, Chair. I'm not going to deal with a non-answer, Indian answer. Chair, maybe, Chair, because I've listened to the presenter saying that under level 4, certain projects will be kickstarted and lots of contractors will be in the field as soon as possible, Chair. Maybe if you can get if you are saying, Chair, if you are saying that it should be part of one of the resolutions, that would be fine. Maybe to get a list of those projects under level 4 that will be kickstarted, Chair, as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else at this point in time? Thank you, Dr. Barr. Perhaps I can link on to what Honourable Marais has asked. I think in general, members of the public often observe poaching and other illegal activities, and they would like to draw your attention as custodians of nature to such perceived transgressions. Where can they report things like poaching, etc., apart from the SAPS, which seems sometimes not to be able to give the necessary response and response time, etc. And then secondly, if I could just say, you've said that the call center capacity, you don't believe that would need to be increased after the lockdown and when tourists can again start booking accommodation. I just would like to point out, you have seen what has happened on the 1st of May with so many people wanting to get out into nature, to get exercise, etc. I am concerned that your call center lines may be quite blocked at that point in time. And then thirdly, did I understand you correctly that when MTO exits an area, it doesn't come straight to Cape Nature, but it first becomes the landowner's responsibility, who is the National Department of Public Works, with the Department of Environmental Affairs as the custodian, and that what I'm fearing is that eventually, when you're handed a piece of land, that you might inherit a piece of land that is full of alien plants, that is posing a fire danger, etc. Is that warranted a fear from our side, or will those pieces of land never become your responsibility? Your response, please.
Chair, thank you very much. I think for me to keep track of all the questions, I'm going to deal with this particular matter, if you do not mind, Honourable Maseko and yourselves. So in terms of reinstating and getting to full capacity in terms of the ecotourism, I'm a little bit vague on the details that Honourable Maseko has given. And I would suggest that I get a proper answer from Shiraz Ismail, our Executive Director, Ecotourism, in this regard. And so I would suggest that perhaps we get a formal response from his office in that regard. Would that be acceptable?
Honourable Maseko,
yes, Chair, it's okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko. Appreciate it. Then, Chair, in terms of reporting crime, yes, Cape Nature does have, I believe we have on our website, and I need to confirm that. Our website is under redesign at the moment, but any of our Cape Nature officers can be contacted in that regard in terms of reporting environmental crime. Of course, our Department of Environmental Affairs Development Planning also has environmental crime compliance and enforcement capacity, and in that regard, both the entities are contactable in that regard. Here, I'd like to respond by also saying is that in terms of the capacity of our call center to deal with an increased number of bookings afterwards, we have been, as I've mentioned, we have been operating full time basically up to now, and the response that I represented was the response from our Executive Director, Ecotourism and Access. So again, I think perhaps in follow up, I can ask Shiraz to maybe just provide a fuller answer in that regard. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Thank you. Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you.
No, that's fine. And then just the last point that you made, yes, it is a fact that when MTO exits any forestry land, that land, and if it's state land, that land belongs to the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and the land is then handed back to them and basically then handed to the National Department, who can then reassign the management of the property to entities like Cape Nature. So I think to a large extent you are correct in that if in that handover process and the reassignment process, if nobody looks after that piece of land, then it quickly can become re-invaded and obviously back to square one again. So for example, in a case where Cape Nature receives a piece of exit land, we would obviously prefer it to be cleaned and from aliens and handed over in that condition in order for us not to have to spend undue funds to get it back into a clean state again. So I think that is confirmed. Then I think let me respond to Honourable Marais' question in terms of what advice that we provide. The advice was in terms of who had the regulatory mandate to regulate the uprooting and the killing of milkwood trees in that regard. I've pointed out that the milkwood tree is a protected tree under the Forest Act, and therefore technically, and I'm saying this for clarity, so it's for technically. This is a Department of Forestry or a forestry branch matter, regulatory matter. So that was the advice that we gave through our department, because I do remember that the chairperson wrote to the minister, our MSC's office through the HOD, and perhaps I can ask my colleagues at the department, Marlene specifically, if just to confirm. So that was the advice that we gave. We didn't, at that stage, we didn't take action. I would agree, but that is why the chairperson of that committee then made contact with the National Department and the Forestry Department Environment and the Forestry branch. So that I would like to confirm. And then, Chair, just in the third place, I hope I'm keeping track of everything. Honourable Moran's question and the request that yes, you are correct in that under level 4 and obviously ongoing level 3 and further, we will be allowing people back into the field obviously under the lockdown conditions, and I think that it is it's a good question, and I will ask my colleagues to prepare when we have contractors back in field that we prepare a list that we can share with the committee of those projects and those contractors that have been back into the field again. Chair, I think that answers maybe everything.
Thank you, Dr. Bart. Members, any other questions from your side?
Chair,
if I get a second chance, I will make use of it. Thank you.
Yes, we still have time, and then I also heard Honourable Bartman. Honourable Marais, you can go, and then Honourable Bartman.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. You're most graceful. The point is here, I want to know whether environmental affairs has anything to do with milkwood trees. Now, I just want a yes or no, because I'm going to go back and read that act. Milkwood trees, if it is a protected species, it's an environmental issue. Now, we're passing the buck here, Mr. Chairman. Now it says again it's the Department of Forestry. Then it's the Department of Agriculture. Then they say it's the municipality of Hermanus who got the authority. They are playing with the people, what do you call this thing? Musical chairs. They're passing the buck from the one to the other, and the people in Hermanus are very, very upset and dissatisfied with the destruction of a national heritage protected by UNESCO. I think it's a disgrace even if we don't have the authority. The Western Cape's Constitution says we can ask national government to act on anything over which we as a province has no power or authority. Why don't we do that? Why don't our department, our premier, our minister responsible for environmental issues demand the Minister of Forestry at national level to act in this instance? Why not?
Thank you, Honourable Marais, and then Honourable Bartman.
Chairperson, I actually just wanted to say thank you to Cape Nature for their answer to me regarding the alien vegetation. I will definitely take it up with Mr. Bard to communicate with him to try and find out how we can apply for this funding for Langsburg. I know that agriculture also kind of works with regards to alien vegetation. So perhaps between myself and between him and agriculture, we can go to Langsburg to speak to people, especially because some of the community members don't have internet or MS Teams in order to be able to raise these particular issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Dr. Bart, can I just ask, what
Sorry,
teeth...
Chair, can I...
Sorry. Yes, Honourable Maseko?
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted, maybe we can get the information. Mr. Brad talked about the issue of the marine protected areas, and he highlighted that the problem, if I understood him correctly, the problem of the seaward entry, that's where the patrol is a little bit a challenge, and it's a national funded project that they are trying to improve that. Can we maybe get the details of how are they improving on that one, because we've been talking about it even the last term, that is where we are lacking in protecting our waters, and we get a lot of poaching happening from the seaward side.
Thank you for that. And then Dr. Bart, if I could just ask, what teeth have you got as Cape Nature, either in the case of the Milkwood Forest, in the sense that can you demand of a landowner to protect, protected species on his or her land? Or then secondly, I also forwarded to you via WhatsApp a message from a member of the public who's concerned about aliens, in this case Hakia, on MTO land where they've tried to report it, and it seems as if MTO is just not, concerned about what's happening there. If you could respond to these last questions, thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. Let me say that as far as having teeth in terms of protecting milkwoods, yes, as I've pointed out, the technical nature of it is that it is a protected tree under the Forest Act, and that is that we cannot change that. However, I think in terms of, and I'm thinking broader in terms of ecosystem protection, for example, a milkwood forest, and as it is a declared, if it is a declared site. For example, if I'm thinking about biodiversity stewardship sites where also unique biodiversity and ecosystems are protected, and these are then signed up into contact nature reserves or in protected environments. If that is the case, that obviously adds another layer of protection to a site like that. So I would agree that, for example, if that protected area, or if that general area, and if that milkwood forest has got a formal protection and so on, that obviously adds another layer of protection and to be able to respond in that regard. So that is what we have at this stage, and I think that the unfortunate thing is that the clearing of that milkwood forest has obviously started. I have not been there myself. I have followed the communication and so on, and it does seem as if it's quite a crucial situation. However, as I said, in terms of the protection that one can afford to a place like that, these added layers of protection would obviously be helpful in that particular regard. Chair, I would like to then just respond. I have in the meantime requested my team on advice on your question in terms of what is being done by Cape Nature to prevent or control infestations of invasive species on land controlled by MTO in nature reserves under jurisdiction of Cape Nature, with specific reference to Jonkershoek about the Hakia. The answer from my landscape manager, Chair, is that there is no land in Jonkershoek. There is no land controlled by MTO that is inside a Cape Nature Reserve. There is Hakia in the plantation area, and that is MTO responsibility. All the sites that have been identified in the Jonkershoek Valley for clearing of alien on the nature reserve, all the sites in the Jonkershoek Nature Reserve, as far as I am aware, has been cleared by Cape Nature and contract teams. So, Chair, I think hopefully that answers the question from the member of public in that there is currently no MTO land inside Cape Nature, the Jonkershoek Reserve, and the Hakia is primarily in the plantation area, and that is the responsibility of MTO.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to Honourable Maseku's question regarding the marine?
Oh yes. Apologies, Chair. Yes. Honourable Maseku, I think I need to confirm that we have a formal memorandum of agreement with the National Department of Environmental Affairs and at that stage Forestry and Fisheries in terms of their Oceans and Coast branch, where they provide us with an annual allocation for operational funding to manage the 5 marine protected areas that we have along our coast and that we manage as part of our terrestrial nature reserve. So that's the first point. The second point is, unfortunately, we are not always in a position to have vessels at sea to patrol the outer boundaries of our marine protected areas. I think if you can imagine the WIP marine protected area just off the coast of the Overberg, it is quite a vast area, and we do rely on our partners and our colleagues within the fisheries branch of Oceans and Coast to assist us in that regard. That's the second point, and I think then also the third point, Honourable Maseko, is that we do rely on partnerships once again in terms of trying to keep unwanted vessels outside of the boundaries of the marine protected. But you also may be aware of the fact that there is, as far as marine protected areas concerned, there is unfortunately no solid line in the water or a fence or anything like that. So vessels approaching the marine protected areas are always, I think, in a situation where they can encroach on our boundaries. But I must admit that unfortunately, within our current capacity, there is very little ability from our side to have vessels at sea to patrol the boundaries that stage. So hence my report in terms of that much of the threat to our marine protected areas do come from the seaward side. We do what we can with our partnerships and the Operation Pakisas to keep the poachers from the landward side, to keep them out of the water and keep the abalone and the crayfish in the water. However, it is a difficult situation from the seaward side, as you have pointed out.
Thank you very much. Can I take it that we can now hand over to any representatives from the Provincial Department of Environmental Affairs, if they would like to comment on our proceedings this far and whether they would like to draw our attention to any aspect?
Honourable Chair, this is Marlene Leross, if I may have a brief input.
You're most welcome. We're listening.
Chair, I think just to highlight that and to corroborate the information around the getting going again with invasive alien clearing and all other ecological infrastructure investment programs in the province with our partners in the National Department, NRM, that they are also trying to motivate for the reopening of their works programs as critical services under level 4. And that process is ongoing because it affects directly the contractors which are working directly on the ground. The funding that flows from the National Department goes to various different agencies for implementation. And as such, there's an industry standard, if you'd like, for health and safety that must be implemented. As Dr. Bart has outlined, the work itself lends itself to social distancing, but transportation to such places and other movement associated with the work does put people under some risk, and that needs to be taken care of in terms of health and safety standards, which must be applied within the sector. So just to add to that, briefly, our sister department, DDAT, is also currently working on different sectors that could assist in economic recovery. And our department, together with Cape Nature and our partners in agriculture and the National Department, are trying to position investment into ecological infrastructure with its many co-benefits as part of that recovery plan, and wish to see upscaled investment into that arena. So it's early days still, but that is currently the work that we are engaging in with partners in the sector. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Laros. Anybody else from the department that would like to respond?
Nothing from my side, Mr. Chair. Ayub Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you, members. I trust that I then speak on behalf of the committee if I say thank you very much to Dr. Bart for responding in such detail to a wide-ranging number of topics affecting Cape Nature. In preparing for this meeting, I was just again struck by just how wide the responsibilities and activities of Cape Nature actually spans. And Dr. Bart, thank you very much. I believe you can report back to your CEO that you've represented Cape Nature well, and we are very fortunate to have you and the senior staff of Cape Nature being there at this point in time. Thank you very much for the excellent work that you are also doing in our province and the respect that you also expressed through your introductory remarks for the wonderful environment in which we in the Western Cape find ourselves. So thank you very much for that. Honourable members, I would like, yes, who's speaking?
It's Maran.
Yes, Honourable Maran.
Chair, can you just check with the Honourable Marais if it's fine that you can speak on his behalf?
I speak on behalf of the committee, and I trust he's actually more on the agricultural side of the committee, Honourable Maran, but that is tongue in cheek. Thank you very much. Honourable members, that then completes the presentation part. I would like you to just remain for some administrative issues, the approval of previous minutes, a quarterly report, and then also to just take note of our program going forward. I have a policy that I normally try to have a brief break after 2 hours. Please don't leave the meeting, but can I ask that we reconvene in 5 minutes from now? And thank you very much for I presume, accepting that ruling. Thank you.
Chairman, I won't be joining you for the next meeting. Like you said, I'm on the agricultural side, but the people I represent are all over the show. That's why I'm here too.
Excellent, thank you, and you're always welcome, Honourable Marais. have a good day, and I trust that the other members will be with us so that we can just finish some administrative affairs. Thank you. Thank you, honourable members. I trust you are all still with us, except for Honourable Marais, who indicated that he was going to leave us. Honourable members, you will see the files that we are going to refer to now, or the documents. Under files, if you go to that option at the top of your screen, I think you press on Teams, and then there at the top files, you will see the 5th of May as a folder, and then you will see the files below. Can I just ask our procedural officer, is that correct?
That is correct, Chairperson, but just before we move on to the documents, I'd just like to know from members if there are any specific resolutions for the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Can I put it to you? Yes.
Yeah. I think the one that I'm still in par is the one that I did ask, and they said they will send it in writing. And the second one, I will appreciate if we can get that memorandum of understanding of the seaward
the marine
operations.
protected area.
Pardon?
Is that the marine protected areas memorandum of understanding, member? Okay.
Yes, that's the one.
All right.
Okay.
Got that?
Chair.
Sure, I see Honorable Moran, yes.
Yeah, no, Chair, look, I'm not sure because there was two issues that I've raised. The one is contractors and projects that will be activated soon under level 4. We provided with such a list. And also the first one basically that I've touched on is that as we move from the different levels, in future that we get updated in terms of what can and what cannot be done.
Thank you, Honorable Moran. Can I just ask, would you like a list of all the projects, all the teams that have been contracted?
Look, Chair, according to the presenter under level 4, there's certain projects that will be kickstarted. Contractors will go into the different areas, different projects, specifically those ones, Chair, so that we can see those ones who were not active under level 5, but they will be active under level 4 now.
Thank you, Ms. Niekerk. You've got that?
I've got that, Chairperson. Thank you.
Chairperson.
Honorable Dartman.
Chairperson, I would like to submit that the Cape Nature and/or the department please provide us with the process of persons applying for funding for the alien vegetation clearing, just so that we have that process should anyone request, please.
That is for private landowners to access funding, to clean or clear portions of their land under their or in their possession. Good, thank you. Any other points? Thank you. Ms. Niekerk, you've got that then down?
I do, Chairperson. Thank you,
yes.
Members.
Yes, thank you. And can I just say, honourable members, I would very much like to visit Hermanus as soon as we are allowed to, where it's practically possible, not only to see the milkwood forest, but also we've been invited as a committee to visit some of the abalone farms there and to engage with some of the people that are farming with abalone in terms of their concerns regarding abalone poaching and the police putting on auction confiscated abalone, etc. So I think if you would agree, if we could go to Hermanus once we're allowed, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair, may I give an input, Deirdre Bartman?
Honourable Bartman, please.
Chair, may I suggest that with the abalone and oversight thereof, that the committee also invite the safety committee to join us, especially regarding the poaching and how the South African Police Services deals with it.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. And yes, I think that's valuable, and I trust the other members will also support that. Thank you, honourable members.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes, honourable.
Sorry, Chair. If I can throw in my 2 cents of trying to, when we go to the abalone, to try and get the modus operandi with the national first. The first stage is for us to have an understanding of how are they working together. then after then that we can involve the police, because of maybe if we can get the report, Sherin can try to get the report of the 5th term when we got the report about the policing of the abalone poaching and the crayfish. It wasn't such a good sight that we need to try and unpack it, because if it's both of them, you will see that one is going to sort of make the other topic invisible, even though they are both very important. So if we can have a stage 1 and stage 2 in addressing those, we'll appreciate it.
Good, thank you. I take it that is also taken on board, honourable members. Thank you. Can we now move on to the approval of the minutes, or the consideration of the minutes of the 17th of March? As I've said, it was emailed to you and it's also available on the Teams platform. Are there any person that would like to comment on page 1? Any of the other pages? Can we then accept that as a realistic summary of our proceedings? Please respond.
Yes, Chair, I support with any amendment.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Maseko. I take it then that is the acceptable to the other members of the committee as well. Thank you.
Chair Deirdre Baartman, I was absent for that meeting. I was sick, so unfortunately I can't support that.
Yes, my impression is that minutes can be adopted in terms of our rules by only one person proposing. We don't need a second. Am I correct, Ms. Niekerk?
You are 100% correct, Chairperson.
Yes. Thank you. So we can continue. Then I now put to you the quarterly. Sorry, Honourable Mara.
Before you proceed, listening to what the Honourable Baartman have said, I hear what you said in terms of the proposal one person can propose, but she was raising an issue that you were absent. I'm not sure what specific meeting. I haven't heard, Chair.
Perhaps she can just clarify.
It was an apology, member. It's an apology. She was sick.
Honourable Baartman.
Chairperson, now I was just indicating that if you needed a seconder, that I could not second, because for that particular day, I submitted an apology because I was sick.
Is that clarified, Honourable Maran?
Clear, Chair, it's clear.
And it's minuted as such as well. Thank you.
Correct, Chairperson.
Thank you. So we can continue now to the quarterly report for our last quarter of the previous financial year from January to March. Anybody that would like to comment before I put it to you for adoption? Can we then adopt that report also as a realistic version of our activities?
Yes, Chair, I'm in support without
Thank you, Honourable
any
Maseko.
amendment.
Thank you, much appreciated. And then lastly, I put to you the annual report for the year 2019-2020.
Deirdre Baartman, I support.
I also support, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Niekerk. That deals with that section of our meeting. Then just in terms of our program going forward, we will be meeting again in 2 weeks from now. And then on the agenda will be a briefing by the Department of Agriculture and CACIDRA on its 5-year strategic plan. And then there are 2 interesting meetings coming up for us as a committee. Also on a Tuesday, but that will be in the morning at 10 o'clock, Tuesday, the 2nd of June and the 9th of June. Due to the technology that we are now using, the presentation on the bills by the delegates of the Department of Forestry, Environment and Fisheries on the National Forest Amendment Bill, and then a week later on the Environmental Management Laws Amendment Bill. The request is that they give one presentation to both the NCOP members and all 9 provinces. So it's going to be a Teams meeting with potentially up to 250 members being part of that meeting, but and I can just hope that whoever is chairing that meeting, that chairperson from the NCOP will be able to handle it, and that all members will be well disciplined. But if so, I think it's a novel way of doing things, and it will obviously save the presenters a lot of time. And also in the past, they would have had to travel to all 9 provinces and schedule a separate meeting with the NCOP to brief members concerned on the upcoming bills. So please, if you could, but you will also find it on the programming or the program of Parliament that has been circulated yesterday, and I trust that that you will please note that. And then obviously after the 9th of June, we will have to respond to the briefing, and then obviously we will have to take a position from the Western Cape on those 2 bills, and it is proposed that we schedule that for Friday the 12th of June from 9 to 10. So we don't expect that meeting to be much longer than an hour, and that is our program going forward. Are there any questions in this regard? Seems like none. So then, honourable members, from my side, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you for adapting so well to this way of dealing with our meetings, handling the virtual meetings in this way. You made it easy for me, and I'm grateful to you for that. Can I just ask our procedural officer if we've dealt with everything on the agenda before I conclude this meeting?
Thank you, Chairperson. You've done an excellent job, sterling job. You've dealt with every single item on the agenda, so nothing else from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable members. With that, I say thank you very much again for your presence and your participation in this meeting, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks from now. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thanks for your chairpersonship, and you too.